That night there was a small dinner at the manor. Close family, a few distinguished guests. Candles were burning, wine was being poured, conversation flowed easily, until the Duke's mother stood up. Lady Harwick was holding a bundle of letters in her hand. The letters were slightly crumpled, as if they had been pulled from a drawer in a hurry. Her face was bright red, but her voice was ice cold. "A servant in this house," she said, chewing every word slowly, "has been writing letters to my son for years." The table fell silent. Anonymous letters. Lady Harwick threw the letters onto the table. "A servant, a woman who lives under this roof and eats this household's bread." Everyone in the room looked at each other. Whispers began. Lady Harwick turned. She looked at the young woman standing in the corner by the wall, almost invisible. Eleanor did not move. Her hands were clasped in front of her. Her eyes were on the floor. "Was it you?" said Lady Harwick. "Silence. I'm asking you. Are you the one who did this shameless thing?" Eleanor lifted her head. Her eyes were filled with tears, but her voice did not shake. "Yes," she said. One word. No apology. No explanation. Lady Harwick took a step toward her. "Insolent girl!" Her voice had dropped, but that made it even sharper. "Who do you think you are? Where did you find the audacity for something like this in this house?" Eleanor did not answer. "Speak!" Lady Harwick's voice rose this time. "Where do you get the nerve to reach for my son's table? Who gave you that right?" The guests at the dinner table were uncomfortable. No one spoke. No one intervened. The Duke, meanwhile, sat at the head of the table, motionless, his face like stone. He was looking at Eleanor. Eleanor looked at him too, just for a moment, just a second. In that 1 second there were years. That night, everyone in that room was waiting for something. Lady Harwick was speaking, the guests were watching. Eleanor was standing there, but all eyes were on the Duke. What would he do? Then, let's start from the beginning. The Duke of Harwick. His full name was James William Harwick, 35 years old, the only heir of the Harwick family. London knew him, but everyone knew him in a different way. Society called him cold. He rarely went to balls, arrived late to invitations and left early. Women showed interest and he barely even noticed. Mothers tried to introduce their daughters to him, and he would politely but clearly brush them off. Parliament called him sharp. When he spoke at the podium, the room fell silent. He had spoken about the rights of factory workers, argued that women should receive education, and brought the condition of the poor districts into debate. The older lords would shake their heads. Harwick is obsessed with something again. But they listened, because more often than not, the man turned out to be right. The streets of London called him fearless, but in his own manner, in his library when he sat alone late at night, James Harwick was someone else. He was tired. He could not truly talk to the people around him. Society was shallow. Parliament was calculating. His friends were well-meaning but limited. Sometimes James would sit at his desk for hours writing letters he never finished. He would pour his thoughts onto paper, then he wouldn't send them, because the person on the other end wouldn't understand, or wouldn't want to. The place where he spent most of his time in the manor was the library. Books, letters, notes. That was where he felt comfortable. That was where he was himself. Now let's meet Eleanor Marsh, 27 years old. She had been working at the Harwick Manor for 2 years. Her father, Robert Marsh, had been a teacher in a small town, a good man. He had educated his daughter. Literature, history, a little French. For the daughter of a teacher in those days, even that was a lot. Then her father became ill, a long illness. The medical bills piled up. When he died, Eleanor was left with no savings and no man to support her. She came to London. She looked for work. The best job she could find was at the Harwick Manor. Being a servant was hard. Waking up early in the morning and working until late at night, listening to the gossip of the other servants, carrying out the orders of the ladies, getting used to the sharp looks of Lady Harwick. Eleanor did it all quietly. She didn't complain, she didn't burden anyone, but there was something inside her, someone who had many things to say and no one to listen. So she turned to books. Cleaning the manor's library was part of her duties, and every night while she cleaned, she would set the broom aside, take a book, and read a few pages. Sometimes, a sentence would catch her eye. She would read it again and again, trying to memorize it. No one knew this. No one needed to. And that night, it was a night like any other. Eleanor was cleaning the library. It was late. The manor was quiet. One of the candles was still burning on the Duke's desk. Eleanor stepped closer to wipe the desk. Something caught her eye. There was an unfinished letter on the paper. She didn't want to read it. She did. The Duke was writing to a friend. The subject was a philosophical debate, whether free will truly existed. The letter stopped in the middle of a thought, as if the Duke had given up on writing. Eleanor lingered on that sentence. It was wrong, or incomplete, or perhaps the Duke was asking the wrong question. At another time, in another life, Eleanor might have kept that thought to herself. In fact, she always had, for years. But that night, she didn't know why. Maybe from exhaustion, maybe from loneliness, maybe because that unfinished sentence had landed right in the center of her mind. She sat down at the desk. She took a sheet of paper and wrote. Not much, just an answer to that question. Short, clear, bold. She left it unsigned. Early in the morning, she placed it on the Duke's desk. Then she left the room. That day she did her work, avoided looking at anyone, and acted as if nothing had happened. But something inside her had changed. For the first time in years, she had said something in a place where someone might actually hear it. When the Duke entered his library that morning, something on his desk caught his attention. A small piece of paper. It lay right next to his own letter, neatly folded but not formal. No envelope, no seal, no signature. He picked it up, read it. He read it once, trying to understand. A second time, thinking carefully. On the third, he set it down and walked to the window. Who had written this? The answer had come from an unexpected place. It had caught the question of free will right at its core, and it challenged him, pushing back against his own argument, not rudely, but sharply. James Harwick had met many intelligent people in his life, but this was different. Whoever wrote this didn't just know the subject. They had truly thought about it. He called his valet. Who entered this desk last night? The man thought for a moment. Only the maid who cleans the library, sir. James nodded. The valet left. He sat at his desk. For a long time he looked at the paper. Then he picked up his pen and wrote a reply. When Eleanor entered the library that morning, there was a paper on the desk. She stopped, looked at it. Her heart sped up. She wanted to take it, but she was afraid to. Then she did. The Duke had replied. It was short but clear. He had accepted her objection, but he had added a new question at the end. Eleanor read the question. The corner of her mouth moved slightly. She knew the answer. That was how it began. Weeks passed. Every morning there was a sheet of paper on the desk. Every night a reply left behind. The subjects changed. From free will to literature, from literature to the poor districts of London, from there to women's right to education. The Duke bowed to sharp questions. Eleanor gave sharper answers. Sometimes she objected. Sometimes she cornered him. Sometimes she wrote something that made the Duke stand there in the morning holding the page, thinking for a long time. She never wrote her name. At first, the Duke didn't ask, but life in the manor continued. Every day, Eleanor did her work. In the morning, she swept the corridors. In the afternoon, she arranged the rooms. In the evening, she cleaned the library. Sometimes the Duke was there, sitting at his desk, writing or reading a book. Sometimes when Eleanor entered, the Duke would look up. "Go on," he would say, then return to his book. Eleanor would lower her head and continue working. The man only 2 steps away. The man who read her letters every morning and waited for her replies every night. Didn't even look at her. Eleanor knew that. She expected it. But every evening when she sat at the desk and picked up the pen, she felt something strange inside her. She was only writing on paper, but for the first time in years, She was truly speaking. One morning, the Duke found something different on the page, waiting on his desk. Eleanor usually wrote briefly. This time it was long. The subject was the factory children of London. Eleanor wrote that she had seen them, begging at church doors on Sundays, tired eyes, small hands. As she wrote, Eleanor's voice had come through the paper, not harsh, but deep. That morning, the Duke held the page in his hands for a long time. Then, he wrote, "I would like to know you. Who are you?" Eleanor sat at the desk for a long time that night. She read the question, read it again. She wanted to answer. She truly did. But what would she write? "I am the servant of your manor. I sweep your corridors in the mornings. I see you every day, but you do not see me." She couldn't write that. What she wrote was this: "My identity is not important. What I say is." She left it on the desk. Then she left the room. The Duke read that answer the next morning. He thought about it for a moment. Then he wrote, "Very well, but one day I will ask again." It was November. London had grown cold. Fireplaces were burning in the manor. The windows were fogging over, and evening came early. Every night when Eleanor entered the library now, she found a letter on the desk. It was no longer something surprising. It was expected, the best part of the day. That night she opened the letter and read it. The Duke had written about Parliament. It had been a long week. He had tried to bring up the issue of factory children again. A proposal for a new law, but no one had listened. The old lords had changed the subject. The vote had been postponed. Then, he wrote, "Sometimes it is exhausting to be brave in this city. To keep standing, despite everything, is exhausting. Sometimes I want to leave it all behind." Eleanor stopped when she read that sentence. She read it again. In London's eyes, this man was fearless. His voice never trembled at the podium. He never bent in the face of injustice. At least, that was what everyone believed, but on this paper, there was someone tired, worn down, almost ready to break. Eleanor sat at the desk for a long time. Two thoughts collided inside her. One said, "This man is real. The man in these letters is real." The other said, "Be careful." She wrote a reply. She wrote a long one that night. Courage is not always speaking from a podium. Sometimes it is simply getting up the next day. When you are tired, that is harder. I know. But I also know this: those factory children you speak of. You are the only voice speaking for them. If you stop, that voice disappears too. She paused, wrote something else, then erased it, then wrote again. "I don't know you, but the man I know from your letters would not stop." She left it on the desk. Then she left the room. That night, she could not sleep. The Duke read the letter the next morning. He held it in his hand for a long time. Then he walked to the window. Outside, London was waking. Carriages, horses, fog. He felt something strange inside. This woman, whoever she was, saw him, truly saw him, not for applause, not for his title. She simply saw him. The second turning point came a week later. This time the Duke wrote something different, something more personal, more direct. "My mother raised the subject of marriage again. A suitable family, a suitable girl. When she said it, I felt a weight in my chest, because I realized something. The only real person I speak to in my life is you. A person behind a letter, without a name, without a face, and yet you feel closer than anyone." Then there was another sentence, the final one. "If I cannot find you, how am I supposed to live this life?" When Eleanor read that letter, she realized her hands were shaking. She set it on the table, stood up, walked around the room for a moment, then sat again, read it once more. "If I cannot find you, how am I supposed to live this life?" This man was searching for her, the woman whose answers he had waited for years, the one he ran to his desk for every morning, the one he shared his exhaustion with, laughed with, thought with, and that woman was sitting 2 corridors away in a small room under the light of a single candle. That night Eleanor did not write back. For the first time, she didn't. The Duke looked at his desk in the morning. There was no paper. He was surprised. In the afternoon he checked again. Nothing. In the evening, still nothing. 3 days passed without a reply. On the 4th day, the Duke wrote, "Are you well?" Eleanor held the paper in her hands for a long time. Then she wrote, just a short line, "I am well. I was simply thinking." "What were you thinking about?" Eleanor placed the pen on the desk. She did not write the answer, because she could not. What she had been thinking was this: if I tell the truth, everything ends. If I don't, how long can this go on? That night, while cleaning the library, the Duke was sitting at his desk. He was reading a book. Eleanor swept the corners, dusted the shelves, adjusted the candle. She was about to leave when the Duke lifted his head. "What do you think of the Harwick Library?" he asked. It was an ordinary question, the kind you ask a servant. Eleanor stopped, turned. "Sir?" "The books. Is it a good collection, in your opinion?" Eleanor looked at him for a moment. Her face was calm. "It's not bad, sir, but the philosophy section is a bit weak." The Duke raised an eyebrow. "Is it?" "Yes, sir." She turned and left the room. The Duke watched her go. Then he returned to his book. But that night, when he sat at his desk, there was only one thing in his mind. That voice, the way she had formed that sentence. The philosophy section is a bit weak. Why did it sound so familiar? It was the middle of December. That night there was a small dinner at the manor, close relatives, a few familiar guests. Lady Harwick liked these kinds of dinners, not fully formal but still impressive. Everything had to be exactly as it should be. Eleanor and the other servants had been rushing around all evening. The tables were prepared, the food was served, the wine was poured. Dinner had ended. The guests had moved to the sitting room. The servants had begun cleaning. Eleanor went to the library. She was going to leave a letter on the Duke's desk. She had written it earlier that night and had been carrying it in her pocket. She placed it on the desk and turned. She stopped at the door. There was something on the desk. On top of a book the Duke had received that day. A sheet of paper had been left. In familiar handwriting. Eleanor's handwriting. She froze. How had that happened? Then she understood. Earlier that afternoon, forms had arrived for new servant applications at the manor. The head servant had made everyone fill one out. Name, position, how long they had worked there. Eleanor had filled one out too, quickly, without thinking. And that form must have somehow ended up on the Duke's desk, perhaps by mistake, perhaps mixed with other papers. Eleanor stepped forward to take the form from the desk. The door opened. Lady Harwick entered. She was holding the form, but she was holding something else as well. Eleanor's most recent letter. She held them side by side. The handwriting was the same. Lady Harwick's eyes fixed on Eleanor, cold, sharp, certain. "Was it you?" she said. Within minutes the room was full. Lady Harwick had thrown the letters onto the table. The guests were standing by the door. The Duke had taken his seat at the head of the table. Lady Harwick spoke, harsh, humiliating, merciless. Servant, audacity, shamelessness. Eleanor heard all of it. She listened quietly. The Duke sat at the head of the table, motionless. Lady Harwick took a step toward Eleanor. "You eat the bread of this house," she said. "You live under this roof, and you write letters to my son, for years, in secret." Eleanor lifted her head. Her eyes were wet, but her voice did not tremble. "Yes," she said. "Why?" A brief silence. "Because I had things to say." Lady Harwick laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "You had things to say. A servant. A person," Eleanor said. Her voice was still calm. The room went cold. Lady Harwick turned and looked at her son. "James." The Duke lifted his head. "Do you know this woman?" The Duke looked at Eleanor. Eleanor looked back at him, and in that moment, in that single second, everything was there. The letters he had read for years, those sharp sentences, those questions. That night she had said the philosophy section was a bit weak. That voice, that look, something changed on the Duke's face. He understood. Lady Harwick was waiting. The guests were waiting. The room was waiting. Eleanor was waiting too. But inside, she was waiting for something different. The man she had known for years through letters. Brave, honest, tired but standing, was here now, in front of her. And he was about to say something. The Duke stood up. He looked at everyone. He looked at his mother. Then he looked at Eleanor, and he said nothing. 1 second passed, 2 seconds, 3. Eleanor read that silence, instantly. Because for years she had read every word he wrote. Now she could read his chants too. That silence was fear. Under the pressure of society, under his mother's gaze, under the eyes of the guests, the man from those letters had disappeared. In his place sat the Duke of Harwick. Lady Harwick took her son's silence as victory. "Have this woman removed from the house tonight," she said. Her voice was no longer cold. It was commanding. Before morning, no one objected. Eleanor looked at the Duke once more. The Duke looked away. Eleanor turned and left the room. Her steps were quiet. She did not run. She did not bow. She did not look at anyone. She climbed the stairs, entered her small room, closed the door. She took out her suitcase and began to pack. Her hands were shaking, but inside she felt strangely calm, because the thing she had feared most had already happened. And people fear the pain they expect most. Once it arrives, they simply continue. She packed her suitcase. Then she sat at the table. She took a sheet of paper, held the pen. She wanted to write a lot. Everything she had never said for years. Her anger, her disappointment, what she had seen in that 1 second. She didn't. She wrote only 1 sentence. "Where was the man from your letters?" She folded the paper and left it on the table. Then she took her suitcase, closed the door, and left the manor. That night the Duke returned to his room. The guests had gone. His mother was satisfied. The manor had grown quiet. Early the next morning he went down to the library. A small piece of paper was lying on the desk. He picked it up, read it. "Where was the man from your letters?" He stared at that sentence for a long time. Then he set it down and walked to the window. Outside, London was waking. Fog, carriages, a cold morning. He slipped his hand into his pocket. It was empty. After that day the manor did not change. The mornings came the same. The afternoons passed the same way. Lady Harwick was satisfied. The matter had been closed, the embarrassment removed. The guests had already forgotten. London was talking about other things. Life went on. But every morning something was missing from the Duke's desk in the library. There was no paper. During the first week the Duke noticed it but kept it to himself. In the second week, whenever he sat at his desk, his eyes went first to that corner. By the third week, he began coming down to the library later, as if arriving early would make the disappointment heavier. One morning, he called his valet. "The servant who left last month, Eleanor Marsh. Where did she go?" The valet thought for a moment. "I don't know, sir. She may have gone to stay with a relative. Shall I ask?" "No," said the Duke. "That won't be necessary." The valet left. The Duke sat at his desk. He picked up his pen, tried to write something. He couldn't. That winter was difficult in Parliament. The law about factory children came up again. The Duke stood at the podium. He spoke, but something was missing this time. The sharpness, the conviction, the tone in his voice. Later a colleague came to him. "Are you all right, Harwick? You were different today." "I'm fine," said the Duke. His colleague patted him on the shoulder and left. The Duke remained alone. For a long time he stared out the window. Where was the man from your letters? That sentence would not leave him. It appeared everywhere, on his desk in the morning, in the library in the evening, in the corridors of Parliament. A month later, his mother raised a new subject at dinner. "Viscount Pembury's daughter has been very well received this season. A respectable family, suitable for you." The Duke continued eating. He did not answer. "James, I heard you, mother." "Well?" The Duke placed his glass on the table, looked at her. "You will find someone suitable," he said flatly. "You know these matters well." Lady Harwick was pleased. Her son had finally come to his senses. But that night the Duke opened a drawer in the library. Inside were years, hundreds of letters. He had kept them all, not a single one thrown away. Folded, arranged, stacked together. He took one, an old one, from the first months. The debate about free will. He read it. Then he took another, the long letter about the factory children. Then another, the night she wrote about her father. Perhaps change does not begin with applause, but in one person's mind. Then another. I do not know you, but the man I know from your letters would not stop. The Duke sat there for a long time that night. Something inside him was becoming clear, painfully clear. Eleanor had been right. That night in the room, his silence had been fear. Pure, simple, humiliating fear. Fear of his mother, fear of society, fear of the name Harwick. In the letters he had written so much. About courage, about honesty, about standing against injustice. And that night, he had not taken a single step. For years he had been brave in the wrong places. He was brave at the podium, brave on paper, but when the moment truly mattered, he had been silent. Spring came. Did the Duke try to find Eleanor? Yes, once. This time he did not send his valet. He asked himself. A few acquaintances, a few addresses. Eleanor was no longer in London. It was said she had gone to a relative in a small town outside the city. The Duke remained with that information. He did not go. What had he thought when he made that decision? Perhaps this. What would happen if he went? He would appear at Eleanor's door. What would he say? Would he apologize? And then what? To marry a servant with the name Harwick. What would London say? What would his family do? He thought. He calculated. He postponed. And one day, the postponement became permanent. That summer the Duke married, Viscount Pembury's daughter. She was young, suitable, polite. The wedding was the talk of London. Lady Harwick was happy. Everyone was happy. At the end of the ceremony, the Duke looked at his wife. She was a good woman. None of this was her fault, but something was missing in that look. Years passed. The Duke continued working in Parliament. The law for factory children finally passed, after long struggles, after many years. That day he spoke at the podium. He received applause. He returned home, entered his library, sat at his desk. He opened the drawer. The letters were still there, all of them. He had kept them through the years. He took one, the last letter, that single sentence. Where was the man from your letters? He stared at that sentence for a long time. No one knows whether Eleanor Marsh ever returned to London. We do not know whether it was the Duke's wife who found the letters in his drawer, or someone else, but we do know this. The Duke of Harwick went down in the records of Parliament for the rest of his life. Factory children, women's education, the poor districts. He was remembered as a courageous man. London always knew him as someone fearless. Only one woman knew the truth, and that woman had long since gone. Let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. Also, tell us what you thought of the story, and share your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.